Returning pilots, I hope you're doing wonderful as you're watching this series on aircraft systems. And in today's video, we'll be covering oxygen systems. And we are almost about to finish our aircraft system series in just two more videos. So after that, there is POF and electrics and your engines. Right, so if you want to study all of these parts, then there is a link in the description. You can just click on that and join the live classes there. I'll be covering all of these topics, and that's it. All right, so let's start with oxygen system. As we have studied in our previous chapter, that all aircraft that were flying above 10,000 feet were pressurized, right? Because it was difficult for us to breathe at that altitude, right? So, as the aircraft altitude increases, the pressure decreases. We all know this, right? That is why the aircraft that are flying above 10,000 feet are pressurized, right? Till here, we knew, right, from the previous lecture, you might have seen that all the aircraft above 10,000 were pressurized, right? Because it was not possible for us to breathe at that altitude because the pressure reduces, right? And in that case, the pressurization system fails, right? Just imagine at that altitude, if the pressurization system fails, or if there is maybe some leakages or some holes in the aircraft or some window breaks, for example, then what will happen, right? So in those kind of situations, there should be sufficient oxygen for the passenger and crew to be able to breathe until the aircraft descends to a safe altitude. What is a safe altitude? Obviously, altitude below your 10,000 feet. So if the aircraft is, let's say, 35,000 feet somewhere here, and it develops some issue with your, what do you call it, pressure system, right? So if there is some issue at this height, and then there will be a disaster, right? So from the time the aircraft descends from 35,000 feet to 10,000 feet, in that brief time, there should be sufficient oxygen available for the crew and the passengers. So that is why we have an oxygen system in our aircraft. So, the oxygen used in aviation should be aviation certified, right? It is not a normal oxygen gas that we have seen in the hospitals and all. It is aviation certified, so it is a little different because it has a relatively low moisture content, right? So these kind of green colored cylinders are for aviation purpose, and if you have seen the black colored cylinders, they are used in medicals, right? So these cylinders, they contain oxygen gas, and these are aviation certified cylinders. So they have a oxygen gas at a relatively lower moisture, right? So the moisture content is low, and the reason why the moisture content is low is that it can freeze, right, in the air. As you, if you imagine the pressurizing system failed, right? So it will be freezing, right? It will be freezing at that high altitude, and the oxygen gas itself can freeze, right? So our system will fail, right? So that is why it is having a low moisture content, and it avoids what, freezing. And also there should be only graphite grease should be used with oxygen system, because if you use any other kind of grease, that it might react with the system itself, right? So only graphite grease is used with oxygen system, since it is conductive, so there is no issue of spark, and it does not freeze or react, right? So remember this term, graphite grease is used. They might ask you in the multiple choice questions. All right. Then we have in our flight deck oxygen system. So this means that the oxygen systems that are available for the pilots to use, right? So there are a few points. Firstly, it is stored in cylinders at a pressure of 1800 psi. Remember this thing, right? That the oxygen cylinders are at what, 1800 psi. If anytime the pressure becomes excessive, it is discharged using a safety disc indicated by an oxygen discharge disc at the outer skin of the aircraft, green to red, right? So as you can see in this diagram, if there is a pressure increase, for example, this is our cylinder which is supplying oxygen gas to the cockpit, right? So there is pipeline, it is going to the cockpit, and there's a mask here for the pilots to wear, right? Now, if this oxygen cylinder is at what, 1800 psi, right? Now, just imagine if due to some reason, maybe it is heated or something, the pressure inside increased, right? So what will happen? The cylinder can turn into a little bomb, right? It can literally explode, as we have seen in our wheels and brake, that the sudden explosion is very, very dangerous, right? So it can damage a lot of systems in the aircraft, right? So it can damage the structure of the aircraft and all. It's if the pressure exceeds this value, or if the pressure becomes crosses a certain value, then what will happen? The pressure is allowed to slowly discharge through a discharge valve, right? And the pressure is discharged, the cylinder will get empty. Now the cylinder will be of no use, right? So the pilots, for example, they need to use the cylinder in case of an emergency. They won't be able to use it because the cylinder was emptied, right? So there has to be some indication which will tell us that a discharge has occurred, right? So on the outer skin of the aircraft, you can see a green colored disc like this, right? So if you're seeing a green disc, which means what, the system has not been discharged yet, right? So the pressure in the cylinder is at 1800 psi. It is maintained. Just in case, if you see a red color disk here, then it means that the pressure was exceeded than your certified value and the cylinder has been discharged. So the gases has been leaked now, right? So this is your oxygen discharge disk. Again, this is very, very important for your exam. So remember this thing. And then you have flight crew uses a diluted demand system. Yes, again, very important. So this is the kind of system used by your flight crew, which is what a diluted demand system. We'll see what it is. And it has three modes. So what are those three modes and what is a diluted demand system? Let's see. All right, so a diluted demand system is a system which can dilute the oxygen as per the demand, right? So it works basically like if the pilot breathes in through the mask, then only the oxygen gas will come in through this port, right? But if the pilots do not breathe, like if the pilot is holding the breath or is exhaling, so in that brief time, since the oxygen coming from here and the pilot is exhaling, so this oxygen will go in waste, right? It is of no use, right? So what will happen? It will only give out oxygen as the pilot breathes. The pilot breathes, the pilot will create suction, and that will cause the valves to open, and then only the oxygen will come. So that is why it is called as demand, right? So as the demand is there, the oxygen will be present, and is known as a diluter demand because the oxygen coming in can be diluted with cabin air or it can be pure oxygen, that we'll see. So these are the three modes. Mode 1, the oxygen is diluted with cabin air on demand, right? So in this case, the on demand again means the same thing as the pilot creates a demand. As the pilot inhales, then the oxygen will be coming in through here. So on demand, and the oxygen is diluted with cabin air. So it is not 100% oxygen, it is some oxygen with your cabin air, right? So some, let's say 60% oxygen and your rest 40% is mixed with cabin air. So these combination is getting inhaled by the pilots and it is coming on demand. So this is your mode 1 and your mode 2 will be what, 100% oxygen on demand. So this might be used in case of, for example, cabin smoke. So there is smoke in the cabin, so you cannot use the cabin air to dilute it, right? So your mode 2 is what? Your 100% oxygen on demand. So as the pilot inhales, again, the pilot inhales, the oxygen will be coming in from here, but this time it will be what? 100% oxygen. Mode 3 is 100% oxygen under pressure continuously, right? So this one, in this mode, there is no on demand. So this is an emergency kind of mode in which your 100% oxygen is coming and it does not matter whether the pilot is breathing or no. The oxygen will be constantly coming in through this port, right? So this can be used, for example, if the pilot is not able to breathe properly or is getting unconscious. In those kind of situation, mode 3 will be used, right? So these are the modes of your flight deck oxygen system. Flight deck oxygen system must be a quick dawning mask type, which can be worn in less than 5 seconds, right? So this mask that you're seeing here is a quick dawning mask. We'll see how the pilots wear these kind of masks. So a quick dawning mask is nothing. It's just these kind of mask which can be worn in like very, very quick amount of time because obviously the pilots need to do a lot of things, so they can't waste their time and you're wearing the mask, right? So again, we'll see how the quick dawning masks are actually worn by the pilots. So in this image, sorry, in this video, you can see that the pilot is holding a mask and look at the straps, right? So you saw that straps, these straps were open with the oxygen's pressure itself, and then as the pilot wore the mask, they got tightened, right? And this mask also allows for different head sizes, right? So the pilot is having this big head, some may be having this big. So it will fit all of those head shapes and sizes. You get it, yeah. So it is like that because obviously the steps are there. So yeah. And then supplemental oxygen for passengers and cabin crew. So supplemental oxygen is again in case your pressure in the system fails. So for pilots, we saw that they have this those kind of quick dawning masks. But what is there for passengers? What is there for crew? So we have two systems that are there for passengers and cabin crew. If you have flown in an aircraft, you might have seen that the cabin crew guides us about wearing the mask. So those are your supplemental oxygen for us as passengers and for the cabin crew. So there are two types of system for those kind of uh, supplemental oxygen. What are those two kind of systems? Firstly, there is a high pressure gas cylinder. So it is, as the name sounds, it is a high pressure gas. So the gases are stored already, like the oxygen is already present in the cylinder under high pressure. So whenever required, they can be taken out through this pipelines, right? And then the second type is a chemical generator system. So in this kind of system, we have a generator. So this that you're seeing here is actually an oxygen generator. It does not hold oxygen at right now. So there will be a certain reaction that will be done, which will create oxygen, right? So these kind of system, which are chemical generator system, they are cheaper, right? They're less expensive, they're lighter, and they require very less maintenance, and hence they are preferred by your airlines. So this is the system that you will see most often in the airliners, and this is less common. So it contains a mixture of sodium chloride and iron powder. So they might just ask you in the MCQs what is there in chemical generators. So just keep that in head. It is used. It is using what sodium chloride and iron powder. So this panel that you're seeing over here is actually your passenger service unit, and in this you can see that this is literally the panel that is over your head when you sit in an aircraft as a passenger. So these are your speakers on which you hear the announcements. These are your light switches, and these are your air conditioning, which the knobs that you rotate around. And these are your masks that are stored here. And this is your oxygen generator. So yeah, a single oxygen generator is generally able to, supply to around 3 to 4 oxygen masks, right? And this is the oxygen generator, and then this again is your speaker. It is repeated along the panel. So this is your passenger service unit. Then the supplemental oxygen for again passenger and crew is of continuous flow type. So this is a continuous flow type, which means what once the system has started, it cannot be stopped, right? So once the oxygen system starts, it cannot be stopped, unlike the flight crew masks, which are on demand and they have various modes. So that can be controlled, but the oxygen that is used for your passengers and cabin crew, they cannot be controlled. Once it is started, it will continue its process. Obviously, you have started a reaction, right? So the reaction cannot be stopped midway. So the reaction will continue and the oxygen will be kept supplying, right? And the passenger oxygen masks are stored in the passenger service unit. PSU, as I've already told you, this is your passenger service unit, and these are your masks that are stored here. They release automatically if the cabin altitude reaches 14,000 feet or by manual selection by the pilot, right? So this is a feature. If the pilot stopped or if the pilot were not able to turn or maybe pull the mask down or they're not able to detect any problem with the pressurization system, then the mask will automatically drop at what? Cabin altitude of 14,000 feet. We have studied what cabin altitude is in our previous video, and either by this or by manual selection by the pilots, right? So there are two methods to operate your mask overhead, right? Then the doors of PSU, that is again your passenger service unit, automatically opens by the pneumatic oxygen pressure in a high pressure cylinder system, right? So we have seen two types of systems, right? First one was what? Oxygen cylinders, right? There were high pressure cylinders. Another was a chemical generator, right? So in case of a high pressure oxygen cylinder, since the pressure is very, very high since the beginning, the doors, these doors that you're seeing over here, these are your passenger service unit doors. So these doors are opened automatically by the pneumatic pressure, right? Because of the pressure of
oxygen in case of your high pressure cylinder system like this. So in this kind of system, the doors automatically open because the pressure is already high, right? It is a high pressure system. And in case of your chemical generators, in which the reaction will first happen, it will take some time to build up the pressure, right? So in that cases, the doors are electrically operated. Right? So there might be a solenoid that is fitted, and the solenoid will operate the passenger service unit doors, right? So this is also a very important question for your exam. So remember this thing that in a high pressure system, in a high pressure cylindrical system, your TSU doors opens by pneumatic, and in case of your chemical generators, the doors open what electrically, right? So that's it. And once the door opens, the mask will drop to a half hung position, right? The mask will drop to a half hung position. What is the half hung position? The mask will not fully drop till your mouth, right? So you'll have to pull the mask so that you can now place it on your mouth, right? So these masks, they'll drop to what a high half hung position, and the action of pulling the mask will initiate the oxygen supply. So once you pull the mask, then only the oxygen will start if the mask is dropped and no one is using it. So the oxygen will not just go waste, right? So only the action of pulling it. Once you pull it towards your mouth, then only the oxygen will start to come through that pipes, right? So this is supplemental oxygen for passenger and cabin crew. So there are some more points. Total number of masks must be 10% extra of the total number of seats available. So that if someone is not in their seat, they can use those masks, right? So aviation is based on the concept of worst possible thing that can happen, right? So if there are a lot of seats and there are generally, like for example, there are three seats, so there will be three masks overhead. Right? So three, 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 three. But for example, if someone is roaming around here in the cabin and the cabin depressurization happen, so there will be a fight between the mask, right? Because there are already three passengers sitting here and there are four passengers that require mask, right? So in these kind of situation, things can get worse really quick, right? So that is why there are 10% extra mask in the cabin and 10% extra of the total number of seats available, which are evenly distributed. So there'll be like four masks here, maybe here four masks, and then four masks here. They have like even distributed extra masks. So if someone is not in the sea, they can use those masks. And also, the chemical generators have a heat sensitive tape which turns from orange to black, right? So, in this diagram, you can see that this is a heat sensitive tape. If I'm not wrong, I tried to find an image on the internet and I'm not really sure whether this is the heat sensitive tape or no. But yeah, this is what I found. And it turns from orange to black, right? So, this is your what chemical generator. So the tapes they turn from orange to black, right? So why are they there? Because obviously, if for example someone in the maintenance crew wants to check if the cylinders are fine or no, so they can just look at the generators. These are your oxygen generators. So they can look at the generators and they don't have to open it. They can literally just see the tapes. So the tapes will turn to black color. If they are black, then they will replace it, right? If they are orange, then it is good to go. While they change color, because yeah, the process of generating your oxygen in the cylinders is an exothermic process, so it will release a lot of heat, and this heat is what caused the tapes change its color, right? So this is again your supplemental oxygen for passengers and cabin crew, and now we have first aid oxygen. So in case some passengers require oxygen following a cabin depressurization, even if the aircraft has descended to safe altitude to breathe normally, right? So there might be some passengers, some old age people who might need extra oxygen in any case, or in certain situations, for example, if there is a cabin depressurization at 35,000 feet and the aircraft has descended back to, let's say, 8,000 feet again, and the aircraft is in normal condition to fly and people can breathe, but some people might not be able to breathe, right? Because of the shock of that and all of those different conditions, right? So there should be something known as first aid oxygen, right? So it is to assist those kind of passengers, and these first aid oxygen contains usually about 120 liters of oxygen at 1800 psi again, and it has two modes to operate. It is a high and a low mode. So high mode is like 4 liters per minute, so it will last around 30 minutes, right? 120 liters divided by 4, around 30 minutes, right? And in a low mode, it generally uses 2 liters per minute, which is last for what, 60 minutes, right? So this is your first aid oxygen. So then there are some points to be remembered from emergency equipments, right? So this is a separate chapter, but I haven't made a lecture on that because there is not much to cover and it is not much asked in your exam. So that is why I have mentioned some points that are important from that chapter that might be asked, right? So firstly, we have what cut-in areas. So the cut-in areas, there are some areas that are marked on the fuselage like this. You can see the right angled shape over here. So these are your what cut-in area. They are marked like right angled like this, right? And they are for what they are there so that the rescue team can cut through these areas, right? So they can be cut from outside, right? So the rescue teams can cut it from outside in case they need to get in the aircraft to save people or for yeah, obviously to save lives, right? And you might be thinking that why this not cut here and why cut here? Are they weak? No, they are not a weak portion of the fuselage. They are actually free from any pipelines or electrical wires, which can be very, very dangerous for the rescuers when they try to get in the aircraft, right? Obviously, if they cut into some electrical wires, the flame, for example, is there, it can uh, maybe spread a lot or it can damage a lot of things. If they cut some hydraulic pipelines, there will be another mess, right? So that is why there are certain areas which are free from pipelines and wires so that the rescuer can cut through them and they're not weak. No chance they'll leave some weak portions in the fuselage, right? They have made so many safety precautions and so many rules and regulations. So they won't leave a area which is weak just so that the rescuers can get in, right? So this is not a weak portion. This is just a area which is free from pipelines and wires. This is again asked very, very often for in your exam. So remember this thing. And that is it for your oxygen systems, right? And again, I like to mention that there is a link in the description. If you would like, you can just click on that and maybe just inquire about the classes. So that's it from my side. There will be two more videos coming in, and ta-da, bye bye, enjoy.